Good morning, it's me again. Professor Papazoris really made me work to come here. I'm talking about the side effects of stone treatments, and this session about the do's and don'ts of treatment and diagnosis, and we will have several sessions, several talks about complications during surgery, so I will mainly focus on the pharmacological treatments. We have different treatment modalities, conservative versus interventional. We have different pharmacological therapies, and I think I will end the talk to raise awareness of the importance of the side effects. Well, let's start with conservative treatment. Hydration therapy, this is something we recommend almost all our stone patients, and also some dietary modifications should always be included in the management of our patient. Not only doing the stone surgery, also think about prevention. But there's no action without reaction. You can also hydrate too much. There can be an electrolyte imbalance. There can be, but most often there's a patient compliance issue. So most of our patients, they struggle to get in all the amount of fluids we recommend, and usually they drink too little than too less. But I remember one patient, for example, a young woman. She seems anorectic. She drinks 12 liters of fluids per day, which is also alarming. She's doing okay with it. Her electrolytes are okay, but I think it's a sign of a psychological disorder, and a hint for her diagnosis of anorexia. Then we have the medical expulsive therapy. This is a highly debated therapy. The last 10-15 years there have been studies going back and forth if you should recommend. The typical agent will be the alpha blockers like tamsulosin, but most importantly, it's still an off-label use. If you prescribe, you really need to highlight the side effects of this treatment, like hypotension, ejaculatory dysfunction, some dizziness, and very important, if they have any eye surgery, the doctor needs to know, because there's this rare complication of the sloppy iris syndrome. So here again, off-label use really highlights the importance of educating the patient what it means to take this therapy. Then pain management. This is something we occur in a lot of our patients. Not only the colic pain, but also the stent-related pain. They need painkillers, and they need a lot of them in the beginning. And the recommendation is clear: start with the non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, the NSAIDs. Rather than starting with opioids. The effectiveness is better and the side effects are less, but still, metamizole and NSAIDs, they do have side effects as well, like the granulocytosis of the metamizole or the renal impairment, GI ulcers of the NSAIDs. And, but again, still better than starting with opioids, which are less effective and have more side effects. Then a cornerstone of our medical or pharmacological therapy is alkalinization of the urine. It's not only important in stone dissolution therapy, but it's also, if you have a look in the guidelines, it's a cornerstone in stone prevention for our for our biggest group, the calcium oxalate stone formers, and we should recommend it a lot of patients, but especially in Austria we have the huge problem. There's one medication approved by the insurance or covered by insurance, but it's not tasty. The patient will not take it over a longer period of time. I tried myself. I wouldn't bear to take it more than a few days, and these are the typical side effects: GI discomfort, patient compliance. This really needs to be a factor in deciding which kind of treatment you need. Fortunately, there are several alternatives. You can choose between different potassium citrates, and there are alternatives that are tolerated way better than the standard alkalization therapy. Then antibiotic treatment, especially for those infectious stones. Sometimes our patients need to take them long term, usually in combination with a surgical stone clearance. But again, a lot of side effects. We have resistances, we have GI disturbances, we have allergic reactions. This is also something you need to factor into treatment options. So maybe antibiotic prophylaxis is not the only therapy available. Sometimes you can acidify the urine. Sometimes you can use crystal inhibitors to prevent biofilm. We heard yesterday there's a new medication. We should try to decrease the amount of biofilm in those foreign bodies in our patients, and therefore reduce the amount of antibiotics needed because we reduce the amount of infections we see. There are surgical interventions, as I mentioned in the beginning. I will not go into detail. We have different stages of invasiveness, starting with shockwave treatment as a least invasive procedure, going to URS, PNL, and open or laparoscopic stone surgery. All those four treatment modalities have their standing in our daily work. You should not discard any of them. The shockwave treatment is not dead. It's still a very important treatment alternative, but also the open or laparoscopic stone surgery. Just recently we performed a robotic stone removal from an ectopic kidney in the pelvis. It worked perfectly. But again, general risk are bleeding, infection, organ injury, but you will hear more of this from my colleagues. Just a short overview. Shockwave treatment, you have the hematuria, you can have renal hematomas, you can have an incomplete fragmentation, you need probably multiple procedures to have complete stone clearance, but again it's a very minor invasive procedure and usually well tolerated. You have the URS with the risk of ureteral injuries, stricture formations and infections. You have the PNL with the bleeding risk, the AV fistulas, and you can always damage adjacent organs. But an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Try to get your patients away from surgical intervention after surgical intervention after surgical intervention. Try to get to the root of the problem and do a prevention and metaphylaxis. And this is something that is important in management of our patients. They need metabolic evaluation. They need a 24-hour urine collection, including citrate and oxalate. They need a blood sample. But again, I put the side effects here as additional expenses. It costs some money to do those tests. There is a poor availability. Even I, in the biggest hospital in Austria, I cannot do the citrate and oxalate analysis in my hospital. My lab is not able to do it. Don't ask me why. I ask a lot of times, but still, I sent my samples to a different lab in Austria, but it works perfectly. You just need to find your partners to collaborate, and it's not nothing on my mind. I say to my patients, go to the nurse, she will explain you the 24-hour urine analysis, and it will send automatically. I will get the results after 4 weeks, and it's not as complicated as it might seem in the beginning. But it is something, it needs to be implemented in your daily routines. And we have this tailored medical pharmacotherapy. We have the thiazide diuretics, which also have some side effects, especially the photosensitivity, the risk of skin melanomas, and can cause electrolyte imbalance and nausea. There have been a study in New England Journal of Medicine really working against the thiazides. It was a randomized controlled placebo-controlled trial comparing thiazides to placebo, and they didn't show any difference in effectiveness. But it was a flawed study. It had a huge methodological problems, and it will still have or play an important role in also in the future guidelines, especially in those hypercalciuric patients. You have those alkali citrates I already mentioned. They can have gastrointestinal issues, but there are alternatives available, and we should look above what the insurance company is reimbursing, and find a therapy that is fitting to our patients, that can be administered over a longer period of time and have improved compliance of our patients. The SGLT2 inhibitors, I think this is a mistake here. I already mentioned yesterday in my case presentations, they have this side effect of glucosuria that can lead to recurrent UTIs, but also to diarrhea and dehydration. But it's said to be a wonder drug. It's cardioprotective, it's renal protective. It can reduce the amount of stones the patient produces. So I guess we will hear more of it in the future. There's calcium supplements which are recommended in especially those oxaluria patients, but they again can lead to constipation, and you really need to think about what kind of calcium supplement you prescribe. Most of them are a combination with vitamin D, for example, which again is not always perfect in our stone patients. If they already have a high vitamin D level, don't supplement vitamin D. Find the medication without the vitamin addition. There are some alternatives. And again, or at last, for those cystinuria patients, thiol agents are very effective, but sometimes hard to get. There's a poor availability in worldwide. Sometimes I need to send my patients to the international pharmacy, and they will get the medication from Japan, from US, from Germany, from Denmark. But it's an effective treatment, and it should be administered over a long period of time to reduce the cystinuria. So to conclude my talk, there are different side effects, and they vary by the treatment modality. Of course, you need to have a risk-benefit assessment of your treatment. If the patient will not tolerate it, they will not take it. You should include metabolic evaluation in the workup of your high-risk stone formers. This is very important to get rid of the cause of the problem. And you need patient-specific approaches to improve especially the outcomes and the tolerability of the medication or the treatment. Thanks a lot.